I see we have, everybody's moved around. Is Mr. Coolidge there with you, Mr. Atherton? All right, we're all here. Perfect. So the board will come to order. Is there a motion regarding the agenda?
Motion to approve.
Mr. Coolidge moves the agenda. Is there a second? Second for Mr. Giles. Anything to add or change on the agenda? So we have three separate agendas. We would generally go through the select board meeting from items 1 through 9, and then we'll have the sewer commissioners meeting, and then the liquor commissioners meeting, and then the select board would come back for the executive session that's on number 10, unless there are other ideas. If that sounds okay, all in favor of the agenda, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed, say no. Any abstentions? The ayes have it. Item 2 is to adopt the board minutes for the June 8th meeting.
So moved.
Mr. Wyman moves to approve.
I'll second that.
Second from Mr. Coolidge. Any errors or omissions in the minutes as they were submitted? None heard. Ready to vote? All in favor of approval of the minutes as submitted, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed, say no. Any abstentions? That's unanimous. The ayes have it. Item 3, Mr. Atherton's town manager's report.
Okay, it's short, but there's a lot of good stuff in it. So, those for the weeks of June 8th and June 15th, I was actually off for quite a few days on the week of the 8th, so I didn't do much for the town. Segment 6, we finally received the V-Trans approval to repair the bridge slab. Site prep work and mobilization will start this week. We're looking at tentatively a end of September, early October completion date. So hopefully that stays on track. Park Street, the new sewer main line and services are all in and connected. The water line started on the 18th and is currently planned on being completed by mid-July with connections and main line in. Church Road culvert replacement started on the 15th, and they're chugging right along with it. Camp, I think, was done up there today setting structures, so now it's just backfill and land work. So that's moving along nice. Rec department, adult cornhole league is back, starting on June 23rd, running till the end of August. That's the first in-person activity since March. They can register online for free and only pay if they show up. There will be a blind draw for partners each week, and winners will be crowned at the end of the night. Our first youth program to kick off will be a Wee Cheerleading Clinic with Commissioner Sarah Whitney. Estabrook Park will host kids entering grades 1 through 4 on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 5:30 to 6:45. Both of these programs represent our first foray into group activity since the COVID-19 pandemic began, and have been protocol informed by the current guidelines from the CDC, Vermont Department of Health, and latest addendums to Governor Scott's emergency order. Not Brandon Rec, but Bill says, as I serve as the chair of the Brandon Independence Day Celebration Committee, and while it has been expected, we have confirmed that we will be postponing the fireworks so that they coincide with the planned Brandon celebration scheduled on September 25th and 26th. The hope is that by then we as a community will have greater latitude around gathering safely and without losing the opportunity to have fireworks this year. And that is all I have tonight.
That's great. Thank you so much, Mr. Atherton. Are there questions for the town manager from the board? Mr. Giles, anything?
Nothing.
Mr. Wyman?
Nothing.
Mr. Coolidge?
Nothing.
Mr. Bailey?
No, not this evening.
I have none. Are there questions from the public for the town manager? Mr. Carr?
I just wanted to say that the crosswalks look awesome with the white lines painted on either side of them. Huge difference. So
I knew you'd like that, Martin.
Pardon?
We did it just for you.
Thank you.
So kudos about the crosswalks. Any other questions or comments for the town manager? Not seeing anybody right now, but if there is further public comment, we have other spots later in the meeting. So item 4 is public comment and participation. We generally start with the board. Mr. Bailey, anything tonight?
What was the public comment, questions?
Yeah, public comment and questions.
Yes, I have a couple quick ones. I was wondering, since we have money in our budget for the town clock, happened to notice when I was in at the attending the event in the park Saturday that the town clock is still not working. Is there any way we can get that looked at? We have, I think, $550 in this year's budget, $1,000 in next year's budget to make that clock work.
So we've had the clock looked at by our clock guy, and he determined that it was an electrical issue. Our electrician's been here once, and he's like super crazy busy right now, and it's going to be more than like there's a problem somewhere between the basement and the clock that probably needs to be rewired. So it's a little more than just a quick fix. And so we've had, I think the electrician's been there twice, and the clock guy was there and cleaned it, and it needs some serious repair.
Good, I appreciate that because that means we're working on it. Thank you very much. Second question I had was regarding the town hall sidewalk and the roof. The last set of plans we saw were exceedingly expensive, and I am not really in favor of moving forward on that at that cost, and was wondering if we could look at just putting some snow shields at the end of the, tiles or whatever to keep any snow from coming off. I don't really remember in my years on the board really having any snow come down that side, so I'm wondering if there's anything else we're doing regarding that roof.
Nope. I think it's going to be something that we're going to have to discuss during budget season because of the price that's gone up. And actually, Doug, when we have heavy snowstorms, that snow and ice comes off that roof at a rapid pace, and we've usually had it cleaned up during the day before any board meetings, but it covers that sidewalk pretty good, and it's pretty dangerous. So,
Okay.
but I think at this point it's a budget discussion just because of the price.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. That's why I was just making sure it hadn't, I wanted to move on it or find out where we were. Thanks.
Sure.
Thanks, Mr. Bailey. Further public comment from the board. Mr. Wyman, anything?
Yeah, I'd just like to put a thank you out to our department heads. Fantastic. The roads look fantastic all around throughout Brandon, in Brandon, and to Chief with his department. Everything's been going on. I think our department heads have been doing a fantastic job, and just wanted to let them be noticed.
That is great. Thank you, Mr. Wyman. I can see some heads nodding around the screen. There's approval and there's appreciation, I think, for those comments. How about Mr. Coolidge, anything?
No.
Mr. Giles, any public comment?
Not for me, thanks.
I have nothing tonight. So public comment. Our state representatives are both here. Anything you'd like to have us learn from you tonight?
Sure.
Representative Jerome, thanks.
Yeah, I just want to give a little update on the end of session. This is we'll be ending hopefully on Friday, if not early next week. And I am incredibly proud of the work that our legislature has done on getting the Corona relief funds out to Vermonters. And so my Committee on Commerce and Economic Development has worked diligently, long hours to make sure that this happens. And we've passed one set of, it's gone through the House and the Senate. There's $70 million that's going to be available to businesses. I'm hoping that the tax department will get the guidelines and the application out beginning of July. And then the House just passed an additional $70 million. Actually, it's a package of $121 million, and $70 million is dedicated to businesses. And that should, once that passes the Senate and the governor, that should be going out probably some, a few weeks after the first set of money gets out. So it's a big package, and hopefully we'll touch on most businesses in the state of Vermont. It does break my heart that there is just not enough money to adequately cover the losses of every business in the state. And we're hoping we can help with this money some. And I wish there were more. We've been promised that if there is any leftover money that doesn't get spent by November, December timeframe, that we'd be able to provide more money to businesses at that time. So two things. First, I want to make sure that all businesses sign up for myvermonttax.com. Most businesses are probably already paying their taxes online to the state of Vermont, and so but the applications will be done through Department of Taxes using that portal. And the other thing I want to make sure people apply for is the PPP grants through Small Business Administration. There's last I heard $100 billion still in that fund, and the applications will be closing the end of June. There's been changes made to that program so that once the grants are given to the businesses, they have 24 weeks to use up the funds. And this is a giant change from earlier rules where they had just 8 weeks to use up those funds. So that can be a huge help to local businesses. And then of course, if local businesses, business owners would apply for PUA, and they can look at that retroactively to the even if they're open now, to make sure that they had some of their expenses or their pay covered during the time that they were experiencing losses. And then finally, you qualify for these state administered grants if you experience 75% loss in any one month during this time for the first group of monies, and then 50% loss in any 1 month during the pandemic time period. That's about it. Any
Great
questions?
update. Thank you. Questions for Representative Jerome?
Feel free to reach out to me if you do. Oh, okay, Bernie. Yeah.
I just want to say that I applied for the PPP loan with Heritage Friday and was approved today. So
I know, it's amazing how fast. And the key to that, I think, has been that Vermonters have been really successful in getting those loans quickly, because we all have relationships with our small banks. Mm-hmm. And I've heard nationally people have problems when they're using like these giant corporate banks where they don't know who you are. But we have a relationship with our bankers. So it's nice to see that living in small towns and doing business locally with our local businesses really, really works. So I'm glad you got that.
How about Representative Shaw?
Sure. I'll be the downer to Stephanie's ray of light. Sorry, Steph. We have the okay.
We're like yang here.
Yeah. The legislature has either allocated or appropriated about $1.008 billion in the last month. It's a huge number for the state of Vermont. And as Stephanie well knows, because she's been working on that diligently for the last month, that getting the money out is critical. And hopefully, Bernie and your group at the chamber will get all your businesses lined up and highway contractors lined up. There's several areas and several areas coming out that will be eligible for these grants, and which is great. They're grants and not loans that we're talking about in this last round of funding that the House approved last Friday, Steph, I think. So that's important. The other important piece about this, there are some caveats in the federal money. One of the biggest caveat that I see, and one of the biggest obstacles I see for the state of Vermont, this money has to be spent by December 30. So the money has to get out and has to get to where people and the agencies, I'm understanding, are working on the application process now.
Right.
So that's going to be available as soon as possible. But there's millions of dollars for housing and housing renovations. There's millions of dollars in other areas that have been allocated But the key is the money has to be spent by December 30. And it was discussed on the House, and I might have been in the bill if that money is not spent by December 20th, we'll sweep it back and get it somewhere where it can be spent in the last 10 days of the month. And if we do that improperly, the federal government will come and take the money back. And in the future years, we could be paying back unauthorized expenditure. So we have to be careful, but there's a lot of money floating around out there, and it's available, and we encourage everybody to understand what's going to be available. We'll know more about that by hopefully Friday, when the Senate gets done with approving the House bills. We have another one tomorrow that's coming in on the agricultural sector, and I hope we'll take that off the calendar tomorrow to pass that forward. That's about a $30 million bill, relief for the ag folks.
Butch, would you mind if I interrupted about?
No, go right ahead. You
Yeah,
probably heard about it today.
No, I wanted to just mention about the December 30th deadline. And a lot of that has shaped the rules from the federal government have shaped, like, for instance, the hazard pay, who's getting hazard pay. It's been a much smaller number of people than we would have liked, but that was a federal rule. And then this December 30th deadline has also shaped how, how the bill has been crafted, but also the rules under the CARES Act. We've been very, very careful so that we will not be expending money that we then have to return. And so in my committee, we've been very, very careful so that this does not happen, and maybe very conservative, so to make sure that this doesn't happen.
And I appreciate, for one, Stephanie, I appreciate that, because we know the consequences of having the federal government claw back money, and we don't want that to happen. So here again, folks, please let your businesses and others that might be eligible for these funds to apply, and you can apply for more than one grant program. That's my understanding, you'll only be able to receive one grant out of all the programs. So, but apply. So that's what we know. And then I was in a late meeting this afternoon that I was shocked to hear that we may not be out Friday because the Senate's dragging their feet. So hopefully we'll be out Friday. Yeah. But just a couple other quick measures, and I appreciate everybody's enthusiasm about opening up the recreation facilities, and I agree that we should. We're not out of the woods yet with COVID-19. We're still finding new developments every day, new cases every day. We've had some in Rutland County crop up over the weekend. So please be careful with that, and do all the necessary public safety and health concerns that we need to do to keep this monster in check. 23 states, so over the weekend, had increases of 100%. Most of them in the West, but in the South and the West, but it's still a very serious thing. And on another tragic note, of course, as we heard earlier, Pittsburgh Days has been canceled, and the Pittsburgh Haunted House will be canceled this year also in October. So those are two big events in our region that have been canceled due to the effects of COVID-19. And to the board, that's all I have, and thanks for allowing me to speak.
Thanks very much, Butch. Other members of the public with stuff they would like to talk about at this meeting tonight?
I have something real quick.
Thanks.
I just wanted to remind everybody that we do have elections coming up. Primary election August 11th. I do encourage people to request an absentee ballot. I think that's going to work best in this coronavirus situation we're in. But the polls will be open from 7 to 7. We're just not sure where that's going to happen yet. And we have a meeting on Monday, June 29th, where we're going to be deciding how we're going to conduct the polls and where. I've been meeting, we're having large Zoom meetings with all the clerks around the state. Some of them have successfully had elections, and they have been doing drive-up elections, like a drive-in thing. Some of them have moved to much larger facilities so they can spread people out. So we'll be taking great care during this election. and hopefully keeping everybody safe. That's all I have to say. I'll know more after our meeting on the 29th as far as where the polls will be and how we'll be conducting things.
Thank you, Sue. Yeah, that's quite a change to contemplate. Other folks tonight with some comments?
Yeah, I have a quick comment. My name's Allie Breyer. I'm speaking as a resident and not as a planning commissioner. I just wanted to talk about, I saw on the agenda that there's a little bit about the animal control ordinance, and that's something that I wanted to voice some support in changing it. Personally, we adopted some of the animals from the rescue. They've been struggling to survive since then. Totally heartbreaking to just as an animal lover. And then working with our vets, this has been an issue all across. All of the good citizens who have adopted these animals have been struggling to pay vet bills and all of these types of things. And so I'd really like to see an ordinance where there is more control for animal control officer to intervene and help with prevention, because not only is this costing the community money and all these good citizens and the rescue, but it's also costing the town a lot of money. And we're not like, these people have done this 2 other times. This is their 3rd time. They might do it again. And if it's not them, it'll be somebody else. And so if we're not being working on prevention on this, it's just going to be an ongoing issue. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So we are going to move at some point, perhaps now, if nobody else has anything else they want to raise on a different topic.
If I can just,
Yeah.
sorry, Bernie, do you want to go first? This is Michael Schenk, and I'm speaking in my personal capacity, not as my capacity on the Planning Commission. I just want to voice my support as well for an improvement in the way in which the town responds to animal cruelty and animal abuse. Having received some of the animals that came from the Kimball Road farm, I've seen the devastation that it was caused to these animals, and it's heartbreaking. And if another incident like this happens either at that farm or a different farm, and we fail to do everything we can to protect animals from cruelty and abuse, we have failed the entire town. It's costing a lot of us. I'm not looking for remuneration, but I know some sanctuaries and some rescues have spent a ton of money in cleanup and in taking care of animals that were just devastated by the Kimball Road farm. And I hope we do everything we can, whether it's modeling after other programs that work, whether it's ratcheting up our officer protection and making sure we have a humane officer who's trained in this. I know other towns across the state need better training too. We certainly do, so that we can have the kind of appropriate interventions, that we can have vets on the scene when it's happening. And if it's modeling after other programs that work in other states, let's do that, so that we have a director of an animal welfare program at the state under ag. And so I'm saying this because both representatives are on the call now too. And I know that some of the select board has taken animals. I know Doug Bailey has, sorry, Doug, hope it's okay. I call you out because you have a big heart and a lot of compassion for these animals, and you did a lot in rescuing many from Kimball. I wasn't as involved as I would have liked to be in the early stages of that intervention, but I sure hope we do everything we can going forward to protect all the animals in this town and do the kind of training and education and workshopping we need so that people know how to take care of animals, and then have the appropriate interventions in place so that when those animals have to be rescued, we have all the vets on site, that the animals aren't leaving with so much parasite that they die when they arrive at their rescued home. So I just hope we do what's right going forward and do a lot better.
Thank you, Michael. Bernie, did you have something on a different topic? Or
I did.
Yeah, why don't you do that, and then we'll, just so everybody's clear, if you're not familiar with how we run select board meetings, when there is an item on the agenda, there's always an opportunity for public comment during that item. So it's not that we're going to just take public comment in number 4 here and not have any public comment later on in the meeting. So I'll let Bernie go ahead, or I'll ask Bernie to go ahead and make his comment that's not on the agenda. And then when we move to animal control, there will be additional time for board discussion and for public input.
Okay, I was just thinking back to the topic that Doug had about the the roof over the edge of the town hall. I'm wondering if with public bathrooms now being such an issue and businesses and letting people access their bathrooms, it's more of an issue now than ever was in the past. I know Bill and Dave in the town are looking at getting those bathrooms in the basement of the town hall open for public use, and that makes them even more heavily used and a better chance there might be someone injured by something coming off. I'm wondering if it'd be able to get some grant money of some sort, or maybe even tying it into the COVID, since the COVID is kind of increasing the need for these bathrooms. There might be monies around that you could get to help cover a bunch of that cost. Just a suggestion.
Mr. Moore is contemplating the suggestion. Mr. Atherton has heard the suggestion. Anything to say, fellows? It was directed your way.
Well, yeah, I mean, as you know, we've had to go back to the drawing board on this a couple times. So I agree with Bernie that I wouldn't want to see any more people from the public walking down that sidewalk in the wintertime with nothing protecting them. So I think that's a question we have to bring up at some point, that do we want to do it this year and not close off the basement door, or how, what do we got to do something at some point. It's only a matter of time, and we don't need to plead out that claim. So I can look for more. There might be some public facilities money. I don't know if we can look around, but I think we could probably fund most of it ourselves too. We just need to do it within the budget.
Dave, this is Bill. Yeah, and I know that's been a couple. It's been, I know, every other year, the application for those that cultural facilities grant, and so this is our second year. It's been 2 years since they applied. The Friends of the Town Hall applied for and got that $14,000 for the stage. So we might be eligible to apply for a cultural facilities grant to help out with that as well this year. So
I'm just thinking that with you're gonna have to get new locks, the timer locks that you want to get, the roof. I mean, that's a good pot of money, and possibly with COVID money around it, something might snake out of there that could work.
Thanks, Bernie. Thanks, Mr. Carr, for the suggestion. Last chance for public comment on items that are not on the agenda later. I don't think so. So we'll go ahead on. We have an animal control ordinance update. I guess it's either me or Mr. Giles probably who's going to have to introduce this. We usually like to throw things onto Dave, but this has kind of not been his particular bailiwick. So Tim Giles and I were authorized by the board to meet with our animal control officer, Margaret Kars. We have done some work independent of her, and then we've done some work with her. We've had suggestions from the town manager, from the police chief, and from the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. So in the packet tonight, there's a draft animal control ordinance. And by way of introducing it, I'll just say that it's basically the league's, the two choices we had were to either take the existing Brandon ordinance and try to adjust it with what VLCT suggested as best practices, or go the other route, which was to take what VLCT suggests and adapt it to Brandon. And we went the second route by taking the VLCT model and inserting some stuff that Margaret brought to our attention that was particularly good in the Brandon ordinance. We also expanded it, and this might be of interest to Ally and Michael related to their comments. We did expand it to include more animals under the animal control officer's purview, and we're able to do that under a public nuisance statute that the legislature has made available to the towns in Vermont. So one thing I did want to kind of directly respond to those comments earlier. Michael, you referred to the farm a lot, and the farm is going to be like the make or break word, I think, in a lot of what the town is or is not able to do. And when animals are on farms, the municipality has very, very little authority to act. It's really a matter for the State Agency of Agriculture. So and that was part of the exploration process that we had when we were drafting this. So the first few pages of the packet are the proposed ordinance. And then we did develop, looks like this, like a little flow chart. And you can see perhaps that there are 3 categories. One of them is a wild, and I can't really tell what I'm doing because it's like mirrored or something. But if it's a wild animal, right? If you see a wild animal in distress, what do you do? And really, you want to call the game wardens if it's big, or there's like a rescuer that's licensed in Salisbury to deal with squirrels and things like that. What about if it's a farm animal, on a farm as defined by the Agency of Agriculture? Well, then the required agricultural practices apply, and the Agency of Agriculture is the enforcing agency. What if it's an animal that's not on a farm? And this is where we expanded the existing ordinance to talk about animals like, my wife and children and I have 3 hens left from our little flock of 6, but we live in town, we're not on a farm. So if they got out and caused some trouble, those would be public nuisance animals under the new ordinance, and the animal control officer would have authority to, make them safe, make other people's property. If our chickens were menacing someone else's property, Margaret would be able to interfere with that and prevent them from causing damage, things like that. And then on the back of that same sheet is something that Dave provided to us, which I think is really useful, which is the farm size classifications chart from the Agency of Agriculture. So if you're not seeing these things because you're on the phone call part, or I'm holding up a blurry copy or whatever, those are in the select board packet that you can look at online at thetownofbrandon.com. Go to the select board page and look for meeting agendas, and there's like agendas, minutes, and packets. And if you go to the packets, you'll see the PDF versions of all of these documents I'm talking about. So that's my introduction as to where it is. My intention tonight was just to introduce this and get it to the board for consideration. My basic understanding as a selectman regarding ordinances is that because we're talking about adopting a new ordinance, we're going to go through a public hearing process. Like, this is not just going to be signed off by the board in a meeting or 2 kind of thing. So my intention was that we just introduce it tonight, but I'll let Mr. Giles offer other guidance, maybe that crossed his mind. Margaret is here on the call, our animal control officer, and then we can certainly start public comment tonight. That's all welcomed, and board comment. So I'll open up the discussion.
I don't have anything to add. I think you did a great introduction.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you for the work. Tim and I collaborated on this with Margaret, as I said, and the others, and I learned more about animal control than I've ever known, and there's a lot to learn, and it's a technical part of the law. There's some real differences as to what you can do, what you should do. As some others have already said tonight, humane officer training came up. Margaret has the board's support to obtain training to become a humane officer, but it's currently not available because of COVID and so forth. But she's going to get herself on lists and obtain that training. And we have, the police chief is here tonight, and there's a law enforcement officer element of animal control also. And the law enforcement officers, as we understand them, are all humane officers by virtue of the training that they've received. Does that sound right, Chief Burkell?
That would be correct, Seth. We're kind of the default person that you would go to if there is no animal control officer.
That's how we understood it, yeah.
Well,
Yeah, Margaret, go ahead.
So I think that one of the things that the general public doesn't understand is that there's animal control, municipal animal control, and then there's like law enforcement, like a humane officer or the police department, and they cover all the animal welfare laws. So there's the animal control piece, the municipality piece, and then there's the welfare piece. And the welfare piece, animal control can investigate, but there's, then it gets passed on to the enforcement officer who has the capacity to do so. there's, in talking with the league, the last time I talked with them, there is a way that the town can adopt a mirroring animal welfare, like all the animal welfare laws, they can adopt them on a municipal level. So if something like the Kimball Farm happens again, then the town actually can seek compensation. And that was something that Garrett had brought up and wanted me to let the town know that there's that option as well. And then that's a municipal piece. So whether or not any criminal charges come out of it would be up to law enforcement. But if it's not like severe enough that animals are seized and taken, there can still be an accountability piece because there's a municipal ticket for it.
How does the board feel about process-wise? Like, does it sound good that we might take this under consideration tonight? I know that other than Tim and me, you've really had it only for a weekend. And does it sound like we could hold it over a meeting and perhaps have, as we did tonight, maybe have a 6:30 public hearing? I'm looking to see if the town manager thinks it's early days for that yet. Are we ready to have this noticed in the newspaper, like we're considering a new ordinance and we want to have a public hearing? Or should we, at the next meeting, first have some board input and then have public hearing following that?
I don't care either way, Seth. If the board members want to review this a little more, and we can do the hearing the same way we just did the River Corridor one tonight. So however you guys want to do it.
To me, it seems like if we, don't delay this unnecessarily, but we do give it some consideration, it would seem to me that at our next regular board meeting, we could have a 6:30 hearing open to the public about this for some public input and some board discussion. And then we could perhaps in that regular meeting at 7 o'clock intend to adopt the new ordinance as we've revised it to that point.
So you're thinking was it July 13th meeting?
13th, right. Any objection to that, or any other suggestions or ideas? I'm very open to ideas.
Can I ask 2 questions?
Michael, yeah.
So thank you I'm looking at the draft right now, and thank you and Tim for all the work you've put into this. Curious if you think such a penalty is sufficient to negatively enforce the kind of behavior we want to see, negatively deter, rather, sorry. I'm concerned that the first offense, second offense are too small to deter the kind of behavior that we don't want to see.
Okay. Tim, did we take that scale from the league's model, the actual amounts?
Yeah, this is straight out of VLCT.
Oh, okay. So,
go ahead.
That's what they use for similar penalties, or specifically for animal cruelty and abuse. Those fees are straight from the VLCT.
They don't actually talk about animal cruelty and abuse.
Right.
These are primarily about nuisance animals and the kind of penalties if your dog is off leash or if your dog is pooping on someone's lawn, kind of thing. I think these more qualify as nuisance penalties.
Got it. So my concern would be that this doesn't seem to even begin to take us towards the kind of enforcement we'd need to deter the kind of behavior we saw at Kimball. And I'm curious, Margaret, if Garrett would consider either a presentation, and if the select board would welcome it, or if they'd consider doing some draft municipal ordinance along the lines of what you described, so that we at least could have a conversation about it.
Margaret?
Well, I mean, I think if Garrett was willing to do that, I mean, that's something that Dave would and the board would have to set up. But I would like to say, because I didn't when I spoke last, that I was actually shocked when I read the ordinance. I really didn't know where it was going to go. And it's definitely a foot in the door where it allows an opportunity with the animal control officer if they're willing. I mean, I understand that I'm a little more passionate than the average person coming into this, but I personally have no problem working with maybe Bill and seeing if we can, do some of those education things of good pet ownership. And, one of the reasons why that I brought up what Garrett had said is that does cover the issue where it does empower the municipality to the extent that it can with penalizing people monetarily for offenses that fall under animal welfare. Because as it stands right now, animal control officers do not do animal welfare. They do the municipal, and it's the police department and the law enforcement that has to cover the animal welfare laws. So an ordinance as it stands, I mean, the town can put into a job description that should their animal control officer be trained and empowered to do so by the town to fulfill carrying out the laws of the state of Vermont for animal welfare, that's within the town's right, which I believe is what they're heading for. So I personally am very grateful that this town is looking up and noticing, hey, maybe we should revamp this thing, because it's a great town and there are a lot of people that care, and there does need to be change. And I don't think that, one municipality changing an ordinance is going to fix everything, but it's a foot in the door of change that's coming, and I'm honored to be a part of it, because Brandon's an awesome place, and I think you guys are headed for the right way.
I think if I can address what Michael and Margaret both have said, I think what we're talking about is a matter of scope. What is the scope of the ordinance that the board is contemplating? My feeling is that we started with an ordinance that was very restricted in scope. It was really limited to dogs, cats, and ferrets, because those in Vermont statute are what are designated as domestic pets. And we took the input from Margaret that she got from League of Cities and Towns about nuisance animals, which I've talked about a little bit. And then we had a discussion, do we want to have two separate ordinances? Do we want to have an animal control ordinance and a nuisance animal ordinance? Or do we want to have an ordinance, specific to dogs because they're treated differently, and rabies vaccinations and all that stuff, and this other one? And we thought, no, let's try to get a more comprehensive one. So it incorporates both of those things, but it does not incorporate animal welfare. That was partly deliberate, so that the ordinance, the way it's drafted, can be enforced with the animal control officer that we have. And I don't mean that Margaret's underqualified in any way. I'm just saying that to enforce animal cruelty / animal welfare would take a different level of animal control than I think we were looking at.
Right.
So I'm still wondering then how we ensure that Kimball Road doesn't happen for a fourth time.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, for the two representatives on the call, what were the conversations like up in Montpelier within the Department of Ag? What was the scuttle in response in terms of going forward to ensure better enforcement, better response with vets on the scene, so that me and many other rescues in town, sanctuaries, don't get $500,000 bills and animals that are dying on our doorstep?
Butch, do you want to take the second part of that, about whether there's been discussion in Montpelier and so forth? I don't see Stephanie right now.
I got back to Michael. He just sent me an email. I don't think there's any I would be surprised if there's any conversations going on with the state of Maine right now, Michael. I'll check with Ag. I can check tomorrow to see what their position is on it. I was just rereading 13 VSA 351 and 354 to understand the enforcement of these laws and who can enforce the laws. Those are two sections of statute that you really need to read and understand as who can do what within the state. And then, Michael, you were just talking about getting racking up some huge costs in your efforts to salvage the animals out to the farm, which is a truly noble effort from my understanding of the condition of the animals. There is a process in 354 for recovering that money through criminal procedure if those people have been taken. And I don't know anything about the case. If they've been cited to the criminal division of Superior Court and found guilty, they have to make restitution to you or others who have put money into rescuing those animals. And sometimes that's really difficult to recover those funds, because typically if those folks have animals in that condition, they don't typically have many funds, but there is a path to go forward on that in 13.
Yeah, that wouldn't be the case
say
here.
354.
They definitely have sufficient funds to provide.
Yeah, but they do. Okay, well, it could be, and it could be sufficient funds can include property.
Yeah,
that's a real wide definition of sufficient funds in the law.
So I guess thank you, Representative Bushaw, for that. What I don't understand is if we do have the opportunity, and I'm depending entirely on Margaret's testimony that Garrett from VLTC has suggested that if we want, we can upgrade our ability to intervene based on animal welfare ordinances that the municipality could adopt that would give us a leg up in intervention. Why we would say no to that if that's a possibility? And what
I would say, I mean, that's going to be a local question that you folks will have to decide. And you talk,
if I could respond to that part, because that was the first part of your question too. We recognize that it's complex once we start getting in that animal welfare cruelty discussion, and there's nothing to say that we can't have in Brandon, if it's authorized by statute, we could have another local ordinance that's animal cruelty and welfare that would be entirely different from basically what this is, which is nuisance.
That's fair. Sure, of course. Yeah.
So that's one way to do it, and kind of keep a little bit of a line or a segregation between the law enforcement side that the state would require for an animal welfare cruelty enforcement versus what they do empower a town to authorize an animal control officer to do, which is kind of the run-of-the-mill routine stuff that this ordinance addresses.
Sure, and it sounds like, and Seth, I agree on the distinction. It sounds like we need more information. And Margaret, if you think, again, Garrett would be willing to give a presentation or draft.
I think that's something that, Dave or the select board would have to ask of Garrett. I mean, I call the league when I'm trying to decipher what I'm supposed to do and the liability of that. But if I'm explaining it correctly, I believe what he was saying was that you mirror the welfare laws, but change them to municipal violations. Instead of a criminal offense, it's the same as nuisance animals. I can write a ticket for nuisance animals. If the town develops or adopts into the ordinance a mirroring version of animal welfare and the violation is monetary, it's a municipal ticket. And he brought that up when we were talking specifically about the fact that animals were seized from this farm, and within 4 days, I'm not even sure, honestly, how involved, I don't think that the town actually knew how quick things were happening because it took place on a state level. You know, like the town really wasn't involved in it. It's select board. It was handled by the prosecutor. And then within 4 days, it was somebody else's responsibility. Like they signed paperwork and the sanctuary became financially responsible for all of them. And then, and with what Representative Shaw was talking about, I saw that too, where the prosecutor can ask a judge to ask for restitution. But I believe that falls on the prosecution to ask for such a thing.
Hey, Seth, wouldn't this be more of a conversation that we should have in the hearing on the animal control ordinance? It seems like we're getting pretty deep in here, and it seems like the hearing might be the proper venue to have this conversation.
We are getting a little deep, and that's why I was thinking maybe we should introduce it and lay it over to a hearing and a meeting. But Margaret does raise, I think, a worthwhile point, which is that we don't have actually all the information tonight, but maybe we should ask Garrett from VLCT to either give us a memo or some guidance, between now and 2 weeks from now when we meet again to discuss this in some more depth at the hearing part. Does that make sense?
I thought that we got this new animal control ordinance from the league, and it was like their model policy.
We did, and it is, but Margaret's, for the part that Margaret's talking about related to animal cruelty and welfare. I will be first to admit, I don't have, we did not really research that side of things.
But at what point, I guess, and I know we've had this conversation, I don't want to dwell on this all night either, but at what point does that stop becoming an animal control ordinance issue and it becomes a criminal issue, which then Brandon E. would take over? It seems to be like once the cruelty part steps in, it's sort of, the jurisdiction has changed.
That was the point I was going to raise as well.
Can I step in here for a second, Seth?
Good, Doug.
Mr. Hopkins?
Yes, go right ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted I do not think it's germane to this conversation, getting out and everything that happened, but I would like to chime in on it for 1 second because we have players on the phone tonight that, because of the earlier hearing, we don't always have, such as Mike Shank and whatever. I think what you're hearing, and I know that I have heard it and feel that this third strike for this farm that we all got lots of animals in serious shape is not going to fall into our animal control officer's normal realm of work, and I hope it shouldn't. But I hope this shows that there's, even in this small group, there's a number of people here. They want to make sure that for the third time, this doesn't just fall through the cracks, and that the proper heat is not put on this guy. So I just throw that out there because I know the chief's on the phone. I know the legislatures are on the phone. We can't let this happen for a fourth time, and that would just be so wrong. But it's not totally part of the animal control policy that we want to adopt.
Doug, I couldn't agree with you more that it shouldn't happen that time, but there were stipulations that were outside of the town, with court orders and stuff on these before, and it was, there was definitely problems there, but this was something that was already, handed down from the last one, whatever, 2 or 3 or however many they were. I
100% agree, Dave. I'm not poking blame at anyone within the town. I'm stating that I hope that the town can continue to keep some positive heat on the state's attorney general to follow through this case and not let it just drop by the boards like has happened in the prior cases. And if that's the best way to stop this, is to have this person have to answer to it through the legal system.
Right. I think we need to be careful to make sure that we don't become the judge and the jury, and that's just going to get us in deeper trouble as a municipality.
May I mention something?
Sure, Mark.
So when Garrett brought this up, it actually was, this was the subject that we were talking about, is what happened on the Kimball Road. And that's why he suggested what he suggested. It's not, it wouldn't be any different. Like, like if the town adopted these quote unquote animal welfare, animal cruelty laws, it's not saying that it's going to cause criminal issue. It's saying that if you fail to adequately feed your animal, and it's not something that the department or the agency of ag is going to come in and seize all your animals for. However, it's obvious that your dog is thin and not receiving adequate medical attention, that the municipality can fine them for it. And that puts the heat on them to not do it. So like if in this situation, the town could seek restitution for expenses that happened as a result of the farm seizure through these municipal laws. It's not a matter of like the animal control officer being the judge and jury. It's if there's adequate evidence to write a ticket, then write them a ticket. But we don't have that right now. And that's why he suggested it.
I think it bears some consideration, but I think that it's pretty plain that we don't have enough information to
I agree.
From an authoritative position to even discuss this reasonably cautiously. So I just would like to encourage that we maybe try this schedule where we will attempt to get from Garrett a clarification about what he's talking about. And I have to say I'm slightly skeptical because I'm not an attorney, I'm not a law enforcement officer, but I've not heard of a Vermont statute being constructed in such a way that like the town can adopt a mirror kind of thing. Like my understanding of the way the law works in Vermont is that the legislature writes the law and we do not have home rule in the towns. Like we have what the legislature permits us to have in terms of our own municipal authority. So I would be a little surprised if it works out to be the way that it's been described, but I would be glad to hear from the staff attorney at the League of Cities and Towns on that rather than trying to make a guess. So why don't we try and at least get some information from Garrett and VLCT, and maybe we're not ready. Maybe let's just have a hearing and talk about it at 6:30, for a half an hour and see what we can get done in a couple of weeks, but probably without the expectation that we're going to have a final result that night. It seems like there's going to be some more information coming to us.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sue Gage.
And it's actually about the actual ordinance, and it's about dog bites. So when someone is bitten by a dog, there's a report to the health officer, but it sounds like it doesn't necessarily go to the animal control officer based on what I read. Maybe I missed it, but it sounds like the person bitten has to actually raise the issue with the select board. Is that correct?
Not really. It's what we're trying to avoid. So the way that the regulations are written currently is that that dog bite belongs to the health officer. And what we're trying to do is to make sure that the animal control officer knows, in the case of a dog bite, that we want the animal control officer to basically act as the advocate / Sherpa to the person who has been bitten to make sure that they get from the process what the process allows them. So the town health officer is going to still be the official who is alerted because it's a public health matter, and that's what the state requires with the rabies bit. But we're trying to get the animal control officer then to have an official role of coordinating with the health officer to make sure that the person who's been bitten can get to the select board in a timely way.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. And just another aside, that cute little farm RAPs that is on there, my daughter Nina designed those, so I just had to put that little plug in.
Very cool. Locally grown graphic information. Thanks, Sue. That's cool.
Yeah, I'd like to just make
a
point, because I worked on this with you and we talked about this a lot. And I think it was my understanding and intention that the animal control officer would be able to investigate animal welfare issues that come before her in any way, either that she discovers or initiates on her own or people bring to her. And that the enforcement of animal welfare and animal cruelty lies in the police department, because these are state laws and we have a police department. And so I see what we have as an ordinance as capturing all of the benefits that we're looking to get. And the only difference that it seems like we're talking about is putting the enforcement piece down into the animal control office. And it seems like we already have that in our police department.
That's a great distinction.
Can I add something to that? If we think about violations in town that have to do with domestic abuse, or where a social worker is needed, or where other professions are needed, how do you best couple, and perhaps this is a question for the police chief, when you're entering a situation like that, where there's domestic violence or mental health issues, and you're coupling both legal enforcement, because that has the most power in that situation, with the professional expertise needed to navigate mental illness, are there standards that are being applied there that we could mirror here, so that when we do have to seize animals in the future, God forbid, that we have both coupled the legal enforcement and the professional expertise in the animal space, the animal welfare in terms of vets, etc., so that animals aren't leaving that property parasitically consumed and landing on people's doorsteps, as I mentioned earlier, near dead or almost dead. Like that's real, that's happening. I'm just wondering how we, to Tim, your point, how we make sure both levels of expertise and enforcement are appropriately entering that situation.
Was that directed for me?
I don't know.
Yeah, so I think, to answer your question, this is a topic I'm trying to stay off of, only because there is pending litigation with this case right now. However, what you're describing is exactly what took place in this incident. This was an investigation that began. We reached out to people that have that expertise and people that by law we are required to consult with prior to taking action, such as the Department of Agriculture, such as our animal control officer, who has a wealth of knowledge well beyond just domestic pets. She's got a lot of experience and was very helpful during that entire process, but that's exactly what we would do. Law enforcement has a very limited role in taking that criminal act and bringing that to the court and making sure that we have enough evidence to prove that. However, I can tell you right now that police are not experts on parasites or on what is an undernourished animal that is on a farm. Agriculture is their place, that's their domain. They're the ones that we rely on their expertise when we bring them into a situation to say, this doesn't look right, but is it okay? I mean, there were a lot of animals that we saw. We had vets, multiple vets on scene as well, that were saying, some vets were saying this is completely wrong. Others were saying, no, that can be a stage that an animal goes through for a certain period of time. So the process that you're asking about is exactly what took place in this situation. And as bad as this situation is, thankfully, it's not a daily event that we need to deal with on a routine basis. But being an animal lover myself, everybody wants to make sure that people are taking care of their animals, whether they're on a farm or whether they're a domestic pet. I would just caution you, we are kind of conflating two different areas of law enforcement action and a municipal ordinance that's really was designed to take care of nuisance issues. And I think that's what the board has been trying to really drill down on and to rectify that, so that they're looking at it a little bit more broadly, but they're not creating now another system of people that already exist to do their jobs.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. And I do recognize that some of the modeling after Maine's animal welfare program would be a campaign that would be directed at the state, and it's nothing that Brandon could automatically institute, and that this would be with the Department of Ag primarily as a campaign. So I'm learning as I go here too. I'm just, as Doug mentioned, desperately keen to not see this happen another time at Kimball or somewhere else.
Right.
Thanks, everyone.
Seth, can I jump in just for a second, anecdotally, and maybe complete the conversation?
Yeah.
I just want you to know that 3 years ago, the legislature held up adjournment because we couldn't decide what was adequate water, adequate shelter, and adequate food for farm and domesticated animals. We were 2 days discussing that bill on the floor, and finally ordered the bill to lie, and it was brought up again the next year. So what you're doing here is a really complicated issue, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you, Butch. Some experience and some perspective.
Well, and I'll chime in that that's part of the reason we went through the process we did, is that we were trying to basically clarify what we already had and include the VLCT guidance to keep us the most conservatively protected. But we're not interested in expanding this into something that gets into the complexity that creates the problems that you're describing. I mean, we're really trying to not let this get out of hand.
Okay, thank you all for the discussion and for the passion and for the knowledge and suggestions. And I think in a couple weeks, we'll all have some more information. I hope that we can pursue it with VLCT kind of on the quicker side of things so that we can get something to consider before we get together again about this. So if we're ready, we'll move on to number 6, which I will give over to Dave. It's his special affair to liquidate town properties. And he's got the George Dinn property, which I want to give him credit for. If you haven't been aware of this, Dave had to actually go through establishing an estate in probate where the town could actually get what was due to it in taxes from an intestate landowner. So Dave's done an awful lot of work on this, and he's got some information related to disposing of the property.
So yeah, I wasn't really sure how to word this, so that's why I put it this property discussion. As you know, we acquired this property a little less than a year ago. It wasn't, and we had to open an estate and appoint an administrator and all that wonderful stuff. I felt the need to ask the board if we should get an appraisal done on this, which I think was the best thing to do before we decide to sell this, because this doesn't fall under the tax sale where we have to go, sell for, can't sell it for more than what we was owed on it. So. It's no secret with the appraisal, the property was appraised at about $20,000. And I've actually had quite a few people ask about it, and it's been a little crazy, and it sort of was on the back burner. But I really think that now's the time where we should probably at least get a for sale sign out there, post something in the paper saying, the town of Brandon has this property for sale, and go from there. So my big thing is, if we decide to put this out like a regular real estate listing, we should probably have a starting price somewhere. There's been a few ideas kicked around, and I don't really see that we're going to get more than what the appraised value is on it. And my recommendation would be to list it at that price.
So what's the pleasure of the board? This is a property on Prospect Street with an abandoned house, an abandoned dwelling, and it's just a little bit up the hill from the Episcopal Church rectory, right?
The house right behind Nifty Thrifty.
Yep.
Was it appraised during the town's appraisal?
I don't know, Doug. I mean, I had an appraiser come in and appraise the property.
You did?
It wasn't done by Nemrick. It was done by Sergeant Appraisals.
And what did they state the value to be?
20,000.
How much?
20,000.
Oh, 20. I thought you said 1. Okay.
They were generous by $19,000 then. But it's in pretty rough shape. I mean, it is. I can't see that. I mean, maybe there'd be a bidding war on it. Who knows? But
I'd make a motion to accept Dave's proposal.
So that's to list the former George Dinn property on Prospect Street for sale for $20,000, which is the appraised value. Is there a second? I'll second.
I'll second it so we can get discussing it.
Okay, is there a discussion?
Is there any other value for it for the town of Brandon?
Say that again, Doug?
Pardon?
Can you say that again?
Is there any other value? I'm not familiar with the location of the property, so I'm wondering if it has any other value to the town of Brandon, a parking lot, a storage area, or any value to the town?
No, it's on a bank. I mean, no, I don't see it. I don't see any value to it.
Okay.
May I say something, Mr. Chair?
National treasure.
So I just looked up the NEMRIC. If you want to look at anybody's appraisal up, you can do it on the Town of Brandon website. If you go to our appraisal page, NEMRIC's online database is there, and they assessed it at $109,600. FYI.
Holy crap!
That's why I said.
maybe we should agree that.
I looked it up too. I was laughing about it.
Yeah, that's what
I don't think the town should have to pay taxes on that amount. I'm just saying.
I don't think anybody should have to pay taxes on that amount for that place.
109,000. Wow.
I think we further discussion.
Yeah,
Thank you, Bill. That's interesting, but thank you. Tim,
I think it's location oriented because I know that when they value stuff, there's house value, there's improvements, there's location, and so it's a pretty prime location.
I think we can do a little better than that. Real estate's really moving right now. It's an ideal time to put something on, even though it's not very desirable. We can always come down if we need to.
do you have an idea of a figure?
Why couldn't we start at 29?
29? Going once?
I'd second that.
There's an amendment to the motion by Mr. Coolidge with a second from Mr. Giles to list the property at $29,000. Is there discussion on that? If not, ready to vote, all in favor of the $29,000 amendment, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Need some more voices here, fellas.
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Coolidge?
Aye.
Giles?
Aye.
All right, that's everybody. That's 5-0 on the amendment. So the main motion then, we're ready to vote on the main motion. Now it's to authorize Mr. Atherton to list the George Dinn property at $29,000 for disposal. All in favor of the main motion, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. That's unanimous. Great. Thanks, Dave. Keep us posted. And we've got a couple of paving bids here, Dave. You want to start those off?
Yeah, these are pretty quick. So this is for what we had discussed, last budget, to do Country Club, the paved portion, Corona Street, and Park Street Extension. As you can see, the bids were super close with Pike at $61.49 a ton and Wilk at $61.90 a ton, which is great to see they're that close. And I'd like to make the recommendation that we go with Pike to do our paving for those 3 roads.
I'd like to make that motion.
Second.
Motion from Mr. Coolidge and a second from Mr. Wyman to accept the bid from Pike Industries at $61.49 a ton to resurface the roads, Park Street Extension, Country Club Road paved portion, and Corona Street. And just for discussion, Dave, is this, this was, the paving article was $100,000 this year and then $50,000 in the budget, is that right? Because I think this is the year we're not eligible for Class 2 money or something.
Right, we did it last year. So yeah, this is all appropriation and budget money.
Is there discussion?
Second.
All right, ready to vote then. All in favor of accepting the vote from Pike, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That's unanimous. Item 8, the assignment of funds.
So I was hoping that maybe we could send this over to Jackie Savella, who is attending our meeting tonight, and who knows if she'll attend one again, but
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's 8:15 here, Jackie.
so this is the end of the year, you know, our fiscal year, and I mean, I can do it quick if you want, Jackie, it's no big deal. We didn't really have much for wants except for looking for funding to cover the 40 by 80 structure down at Highway, which we found fairly easily right out of the buildings and grounds. So, and that's really it. Just Jackie did this little summary saying, you know, that's where the money's coming from. And then we have the restricted funds that don't require any action. And you know, as you know, Highway automatically rolls over. So that's really all we're doing, looking for this year is to do the, oh, and the broadband project too. I'm sorry, with Bill and his economic development for the, you know, we've been working on this fiber optic in town and everything. So we want to keep rolling with that to try to get a grant to make that happen. So pretty small stuff this year. I don't know if Jackie had anything to add to that.
Not really. I mean, it's a very short amount of stuff that everybody wanted or needed for this year. Thankfully, you know, most of the time, a couple of times, normally we have, there's some funds for rec, but we didn't have any extra stuff. We did have a couple of rec donations that are down in the restricted funds. There was some dog park money, and then there was a donation for the Seminary Hill that's going to be used for a grant match, but that is automatically restricted. So it's really just the 2 motions that we're looking for tonight to get assigned for next year. So just the 48,000 and then 10,000 for economic development.
Thank you. What's the pleasure of the board on the request for the 2 motions to assign funds from this year's budget to next year's for the projects on the list?
I'll make a motion to fund it, both projects.
Mr. Wyman moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Giles has a second. Any discussion on these? Public discussion? All right, ready to vote. All in favor of assigning the 48,000 from Highway and Buildings and Grounds budget for the new highway structure and 10,000 from Economic Development for the grant match for broadband, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. That's unanimous. Item 9, there's 2 warrants. What's the pleasure of the board?
I'll make a motion to approve the first warrant, June 22, 2020, in the amount of $152,021.98.
The motion by Mr. Coolidge. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Wyman. Any discussion on the first warrant? Any questions on the bills?
Yes, I have one question.
Yes.
I'm sure it's a great answer, but Wind River Environmental, what did they do for us?
We rented a vac machine, which you use to clean out culverts, and we use it on sewer structures. So it's a vac instead of a jetter.
Okay. All right, that's all I wanted to know.
Sure.
That one's new to me.
Yeah, we do it every now and then.
Any other questions about the bills? If not, all in favor of the first warrant, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. That's unanimous. And the second warrant is for Route 7.
I'll make a motion to approve the Route 7 construction warrant, June 22nd, 2020, in the amount of $16,197.50.
Second.
Motion from Mr. Wyman and a second from Mr. Bailey. Are there any questions? If not, we're ready to vote. All in favor of this warrant, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. That's unanimous. Okay, so at this time, we'll recess the select board at 8:21. And is anyone here for a liquor license? No, we'll do the sewer one first then, because that was first in my stack. So it's 8:21, and we'll call the Brandon Board of Sewer Commissioners to order. Is there a motion on the agenda? Mr. White moves to adopt. Mr. Coolidge had a second. Any changes to be made? Doesn't sound like it. All in favor of the agenda, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. That's unanimous. Enough. Item 2, approval of the minutes for June 8th.
Make a motion to approve those minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Coolidge. Is there a second? Okay. Any errors or omissions in the minutes as read? If not, all in favor of approval of the minutes as read for June 8th, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. Any abstentions? You guys have it. Item 3, the 2020 to 2021 budget for wastewater. There's 3 people here that could have positive input to introduce this. I don't know. Dave, did you develop this, or Jackie, or did Sue, or all of you, or what?
Jackie and I did it. We did call Sue a couple times. As you know, we create the wastewater budget every year, and a couple of things that we looked at in here was for our budget for our town. When we did the town budget, we had put back in the $30,000 that was coming out of wastewater for admin services in our town budget. So we wanted to make sure that number was back in there at 30, because it had been down to 10. And we did the equipment line, which is on page 2, new equipment, miscellaneous tools. We have it at 25,000 because we're really looking to purchase a vac jetter trailer. So the thing that we just rented that Doug had asked about, that was a vac, and we have a jetter, but the jetter is incredibly old and it's failing constantly. We just had to put a bunch of money into it. So we do need to have a vac for these 4 superstructures or storm structures that we just put on the Route 7 project to clean them out annually. So that's really the only big increase that's in this budget. As well, I'm actually trying to get numbers right now for financing on that. Sue wasn't quite comfortable with us just cutting a check for it just because of where we are with projects and everything. So they're roughly around $100,000. It's not a ton of money for a piece of equipment that's probably going to get used a lot. So that's really the only drastic increase that's sort of, out of the ordinary in this budget. Everything else is pretty much the same.
I'm curious about the projecting aspect of the budget. When I look at this first sewer fees revenues, this is page 1 of 3. In 2019, we budgeted $515,000 in revenues. We actually took in $492,000. And in 2020, we budgeted $515,000 again, and we took in $443,000.
You have to look at delinquencies, Tim.
Okay.
So we have delinquencies, it runs pretty much the same every year, and then, we do what we have to do to get the money back. So that's pretty average for delinquencies I think on wastewater.
515, we're thinking we're going to get 515, and
well, we also have, it's based on usage, so it's a squirrely number to try to narrow down. But we're also behind, so that's important to note too. We just sent out sewer and water bills that brought us through last January. So we've got 6 months to reconcile once we get a billing out sometime in August. So that number will probably change some. That's always been the difficult part, is we've built based on how we were doing things in the past. We were billing, we were always 6 months or 8 months even behind. So we were reconciling things much later in the year, and that makes it difficult to budget sometimes. But I'm really hoping that this quarterly billing will make things a lot easier going forward.
Yeah, well, I'm just really curious about, because we're looking at a budget and how the process works, because the same thing works with expenditures. If you look at the very last page, and it shows that, we budgeted 759,000 in expenditures, but we only spent 689,000, which is great. And then we budgeted 855 and we spent 651, which is an even bigger difference in a different direction. And I guess I'm thinking that as far as how budgets typically work is, you learn from, a previous year kind of why your number was, off or on, and then you adjust so those differences get smaller. And it seems like they're getting bigger. And again, I'm just trying to wrap my head around the process. Why wouldn't we budget expenditures closer to what we spent last year?
Everything's going up, Tim.
Well, there's also, we have an old system down there, and some of those budget numbers are in case numbers. I know we've got, some of them are a little bit inflated because if something crashes and burns, it's a lot of money. And I know that, so we're budgeting for some unplanned things too.
I can tell you right now that we're going to have to figure out when we're probably going to have to bond, like we did with Champlain Street Pump Station. The Newton Road Pump Station is failing bad, and it's old. I've actually asked Aldrich and Elliott to try to get a scope and fee on what it's going to cost to rebuild it, or put a new one in. So a lot of these numbers that are on like page 3, like collection systems, aeration, and outside equipment. So the pump stations, $25,000 doesn't cover anything. I mean, what do we spend on Champlain Street? $600,000 to rebuild that station and slip line that line. Collection systems is basically just our 22 miles of sewer line that are incredibly old. So then you think when we had the sewer break there a couple of years ago, and the state decided to fine us, that was $12,000 that just went out the door that we had to pay because we had a sewer line break. So. I mean, honestly, this is one of those budgets where, and I think some of us who've been on this for a while know that it's probably not enough. We have a 50-year-old sewer system that wasn't really well planned for something happening on it, and we've been trying to catch up to get to that point. So it's all old. It's all a very old system. We're fortunate we got as much as we did out of segment 6 to get a lot done. So.
Now, I totally get the new numbers and why we have the new numbers. What I'm trying to understand is if the budget last year was for 855,000, why did we only spend 651,000? In other words, why didn't we spend all that money for things that we apparently needed?
Well, we have to, Tim, in this one we have to anticipate breakdowns. I mean, if we lose a pond, paddles on the pond, one of the ponds down at Wastewater, you got to call a specialist then. It's got to be done. We had an electric panel go on the Newton Road one. That's a $4,000 bill. It's going to happen here probably next meeting maybe.
So if things go well and we don't have any problems, are we likely to have spent $650,000 next year as well? And it'll be that different than what
I can tell you what, the way things are going, things are not going to go well. Things are old and breaking, and that's really where we're at. Like, we're going to have to really have a conversation about bonding for some other improvements because it's so old.
Yeah.
So
for explaining that. I mean, it's just
it's a very expensive, it's the most expensive thing we have in town to run. It's a lot of mechanical and a lot of line, and sewer line, like I said, 22 miles of sewer, that's a lot of sewer line, and most of it's old. So it is a lot of upkeep.
Seth, you're muted.
In terms of how, thank you. In terms of how the budget's been operating, I do see we've been projecting deficit budgets, at least the last two, but then the actual numbers that have come in have come very close to a break-even position when you're talking about $600,000-$700,000 kind of thing. So,
Well, that's because we budget on the cash flow basis, but it's actually an enterprise fund, so it's handled just like a business. Instead of, like in the general fund, when we spend something on capital, you know, a piece of equipment or something, that's an expense line item. It's handled differently in an enterprise fund. A capital item goes into an asset; it becomes an asset. So it's not actually on the expense line. That's why they look remarkably different too. If we also the payment of debt, we budget that on the cash flow basis, but when the transaction actually happens, it reduces a liability. Is that helpful? I know it's confusing. I've actually been trying to get the Vermont GFOA to do a sewer budgeting thing because it's complicated. We tend to want to budget on the cash flow basis so we know where our cash flow is going to end up, but we can't keep the books on the same basis because you have to keep them like an enterprise fund. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
that was enlightening, yes. I just wonder, you know, from what Dave has said, like, and I know that we just sent out a combined sewer water billing and people have expressed displeasure about it just the way it is. And I also know that the board did double sewer rates a number of years ago. I mean, just operationally, are we, like, should we be salting some money away for grant matches? Should we be putting an assessment out to repair this, you know, like a special assessment 1 year, we're going to have to replace the Newton Road pump station kind of thing? Like, are we not asking enough of the sewer users to be responsible?
I see where you're going, Seth. I don't think so. I think the problem is there, and I don't want to point the finger at anybody, but there was no planning for 50 years on how to replace any of this stuff. And we are certainly at that point where having a nice savings account would be very helpful. And, you know, the amounts of money that it costs to do these pump stations and everything, I don't think it would be, I think it's more beneficial to figure out what your lifespan is and what your bond note is to get the best out of your dollar for that, and not like put it onto the users all at once, because it will, that's a big chunk of change for you know, the amount of sewer users to take on, whether it's a year or 2 years or whatever. You know, we can, the bonds are a little bit easier to maintain that way. So
we were required, the USDA required us to be putting $40,000 a year away, which we do and have been, and that fund is, Jackie, like 120,000 maybe? I don't have it in front of me. So other organizations that are lending us money have made certain requirements that we put dollars away for, because it had never happened in the past. So we are doing that some. Perhaps we could do more, but it is happening some.
yeah, we were required to do that when we did the Champlain Street pump station project.
Okay. Great info from all of you. Thank you. So are we ready to vote on the budget? You want to discuss a little bit more? Is there a motion to adopt the budget that's been proposed for the wastewater enterprise?
I'll make that motion.
Thanks, Mr. Coolidge. Is there a second?
Sure.
Second from Mr. Wyman. Any more discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed say no. The ayes have it. Okay.
Before we adjourn, do we have any update on the water meter replacements? How that's going?
That's the sewer related question, right? They were going to get back to us.
So at the last meeting, Ray had just sent had prepped a letter to send out. I don't know if it's gone out yet. I'm not a sewer user, so I don't know. That's the last I've spoke with him about it, so.
The letters went out. I received one. I'm one of the ones with a bad meter.
I'm a sewer user, but I didn't get any letter. So
They only sent it to people who have issues with their meters, so. And they asked if we could set up a time for an access so they could go in and replace the meters.
great, thanks.
I think I got one too, I think.
I did not either, but okay, that's good to know that that's been followed up on. Anything else on that, Tim?
No, I'm just trying to keep track of how that's coming along.
That's good to keep.
I think the only ones that got it were the people that had the estimated water amounts on their bills.
Okay.
So the ones that got the water sewer bills that had estimated readings, they're the ones that would have gotten those letters.
Right. Okay. Perfect. Anything else before we adjourn the sewer meeting? If not, we're ready, Mr. Coolidge.
Well, sorry about that. Say it again. Motion to adjourn, Seth?
Adjourn. All right, is there a second? I'll second it. Not debatable. All in favor of adjourning the sewer commissioners say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed say no. The ayes have it. Adjourned at 8:37. I'll call the Brandon Board of Liquor Control Commissioners to order at 8:37. Is there a motion on the agenda?
So moved.
Mr. Wyman moves. Is there a second?
Yep.
Mr. Coolidge gives a second. Any changes to be made? None heard. All in favor of the agenda say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed say no. Any abstentions? The ayes have it. Is there a possibility of doing item 2 and item 3 together?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Is there a motion then?
Absolutely.
Motion from Coolidge, second from Wyman to take 2 and 3 as a consent agenda. Generally, there's no discussion on consent agendas. So if you're ready to vote, say aye. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. The ayes have it. Item 4,
Motion to adjourn this meeting?
motion to adjourn liquor control. Mr. Coolidge?
Second.
Second from Mr. Wyman. All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
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 That one was good. 8:38. Okay. Then I think what we're going to do then is just have this executive session about the labor contracts, yeah? We'll have Dave in on it. Should we have